Hello and welcome to the L&D Go Beyond podcast, where we gather workplace learning insights from leading experts in our domain to enable the L&D community go beyond. My name is Amit Garg, and this is episode number 20. Today we have Shantanu Bhattacharya joining us. Shantanu is an L&D, HR, and OD professional with over 25 years of experience in learning strategy, and implementation, education consulting, people development, educational design, and content development in organizations worldwide. He has special expertise in e-learning, learning management systems, and technology-based areas. Shantanu is also a speaker at various L&D and learning tech conferences like People Matters, CLO Summit, and L&D Tech, and has recently been named as one of the top HR influencers by ETHR World. Congratulations, Shantanu.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Very welcome. I'm very pleased to have you join us this podcast. Thank you. And so today we're going to be discussing workplace learning strategy post-pandemic.
Yeah, really very topical, and as being part of an organization currently that is consulting about workplace learning strategies. I am, and also having worked with businesses earlier, I'm in a fairly unique position to have seen the shifts, the seismic shifts actually that have been happening in the whole workplace learning scenario. So yeah, I'm happy to be able to share my thoughts today with you.
Fantastic. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for joining us. So Shantanu, if we were to, just get your sense of, let's understand how the businesses have evolved or are evolving due to the pandemic, especially from the L&D perspective.
Mm-hmm. I think some things go without saying. I mean, we have obviously seen an explosion of digitization, right? And it kind of reflects in everything around us. It reflects on it reflects on the way businesses are being conducted. It reflects on strategy. It's being reflected in the huge push towards technology, right? And obviously, learning and development, organization change management, all these things, talent management itself, are not immune to these changes. And this push for digitization is perhaps the single biggest sort of change. But however, digitization is a fairly kind of wide sort of term, right? So it's important for us to also drill down into what happens, what is about digitization in L&D, because it's not just creating e-learning courses, right? It's also about creating an infrastructure, if I can call it, or superstructure probably is a better word, which enables learning with digital techniques, digital health, right? Because learning is, it stands on its own. It's only digital is the mode in which you, convey it, or in which you take it to the end users, the audiences, and so on. So I think it is very important for us to really look at, parse this whole digitization concept and see what is the actual impact on the ground in terms of learning. For businesses, as I have seen, even just before before pandemic, when I was working with a different organization, a multinational health tech multinational, and I was part of the team that was designing and developing learning, right? I built that team. I could see the push towards digitization happening already. So it's not something that the pandemic or that COVID has started. It is something that COVID has accelerated, right? And even earlier, when you talked about digitization, there was always that feeling that, hey, I mean, this is good, we are doing it, but the reasons were, more in terms of efficiency gains, cost savings, etc. And, there was always the thought that, okay, if we had the money, if we didn't have to worry about efficiency, then we would do larger, sort of classroom sessions and, things like that. So there was still that feeling that the traditional modes were the best and the digital modes were supplementary in nature. It would reinforce, it would support the standard, sort of training modes. What the pandemic has done is to kind of completely flip that on its head, right? It has made digital learning, digital based learning by the default. It has made that the primary mode, and everything else becomes supplementary to this. And this is, it seems sort of simple. It just seems a question of moving a degree, but this is a, to use a cliche, this is a major paradigm shift that has happened. And organizations are struggling with this, frankly. They are struggling because it is easy to think of it in conceptual terms that, okay, we will do, everything, digitally. It's just a question of moving the classroom into a virtual ILT training. But the impact, the repercussions of this being the only possible option, that's what the pandemic did for 2 years. It was been the tremors have been felt far and wide, because all the uh, merits and, more importantly, demerits of the way we were implementing digitization in training, they have been shown into sharp relief, right?
Mm.
So we did that. We were doing digitization without really doing a very good job of being able to calculate or gauge the effectiveness of the learning, for example, because we thought, okay, there are always other, other support. I'll give you one example. There are a lot of organizations that put a lot of belief in, and as do I. I think it's a good model. The ratios might be not always accurate. The 70-20-10 mode of learning, right? So 10% of the learning that organizations do happens in a formal sort of basis, the actual training that people have to undergo. 20% happens, in coaching, mentoring, sort of, beyond the sitting at a computer, beyond attending class or training. And 70% of the learning happens kind of on the job. By the way, when you ask somebody, you ask a colleague, you talk to a senior, etc. Now, what the pandemic has done is reduce the scope of that 70% so dramatically that people are beginning to understand how important that was, right? We spent a lot of time and money doing the 10%. Some relatively mature organizations tried to structure the 20%, right? The 70% kind of happened by the way. We took it for granted.
Mm.
But when you can't meet your peers and your seniors, and the experts on a regular basis, right? And you have to set up a Zoom call or a Teams thing on a calendar to even ask a question, or you ping them, which is more intrusive, you don't like ping. You suddenly realize how important it was to just walk up to somebody and say, how do you do this, or do you have a point of view on this, and get that instant knowledge, right? Those are the challenges that, where, suddenly kind of exposed became really important. So I think that shift is what I've seen most in organizations, because of the pandemic. I mean, I can talk more, but let's, I want, let's go ahead and talk about what you want to ask next, and we'll come back to this topic, I'm sure, because it's a recurring theme.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is more like an overarching, trend that we are seeing. So what I pick from there, Shantanu, is number one, of course, not that digitalization or digitization was not happening. Pandemic accelerated it, but it has not just accelerated it. There is a paradigm shift as it has become the primary mode of delivering learning or accessing learning. And it has also exposed things that we took for granted but were very important, and they have become a little more difficult in the new structure, right? So that's where we stand today. Yeah, fantastic. Okay. Do you see there is a higher or a lower focus on learning itself? Has it increased because of the pandemic, or has it gone down?
I think it's the focus on learning has definitely increased, right? And it has increased because something needs to take that vacuum created by the lack of that 70%.
Okay. Okay.
Right. So, if we are saying that 70% of skilling, new learning was happening informally, and now that that window has kind of closed, something has to take that place, because otherwise people would be just dependent on the 10 and the 20. 20 also would reduce for obvious reasons, right? And so what is the alternative? What replaces it? uh, the 20 has to expand to maybe 40, the 10 has to expand to maybe 20, right? Not an ideal scenario, but that is the scenario that we are seeing right now, right? I work in a technology company, right? I work with Accenture currently. It's a technology company, and I can see the pace, the sheer pace of technology adoption and change that is happening in organizations worldwide, including my own company. If we do not expand that, that 20% and the 10%, people will actually get left behind. The whole concept of training and learning has become even more important for any organization, not just for learning new skills, but even for upskilling the same employees that you have, right? So if you take any sector for that matter, since everything is becoming, there's a move towards digitization, there are a lot of jobs where the people, the employees need to upskill themselves to adapt to the digital world. Right. And these are, I'm even talking about digital natives. It's got nothing to do with how comfortable you are with technology. You can be comfortable with technology, but you still need to understand that your entire uh, sector or industry, everything is moving digital, right? And you will have to change your skill, you have to change your perspective accordingly, right? So this is a major, and the only way you can do that is by ensuring that the L&D, the L&D impact in the organization is expands. It covers you to fill the vacuum that has been created by, the lack of interpersonal, sort of interaction, if I can put it that way. Again, this is something that is a normal course of events, and it has been accelerated by the pandemic, by the increase in distributed workforces. And we were just discussing earlier, by people working from home. In many industries, even project teams are globally distributed, right? And in some places, of course, people are coming back to office. But I think the L&D world has forever changed. It's never going to go back. Even if we all start going back to office, L&D has changed forever. It's never going to go back to the way it was earlier.
That's very interesting. The observation that you made about how this shift has actually forced people and L&D to think about, increasing that 10, because the 70 has gone missing, and even 20 may have diminished. So the focus on 10 has increased. In some cases, do you think it has also increased because in early days people had a lot of time, they saved, time traveling, and L&D also thought, let's do more learning during this time, etc. And maybe it was a good thing to do because there was some required learning at that point of time initially, resilience and beating stress and staying healthy and those kind of things, because people definitely needed in the first 3 6 months as they were getting used to the new world. But after that, has it continued also because of availability of time, or is it a strategic shift that has happened in terms of realigning that 70 20 10 to some extent?
Um, I think it's the couple of things have worked uh, in tandem, right? In this case, I'll come to the question, but I'm just trying to think of the impacts that uh, the pandemic, of course. I mean, it's got the major, sort of focus, and that's changed sort of everything. But I think there has been, what it has also led to has is a major mind shift, both among management, if I can call it that way, and among employees, right? And it is being seen in a couple of ways. What was earlier thought of as sort of, optional training, or also in some cases also almost dismissed as, being kind of the froth on the top, and things like that, which was training on uh, mental health, for example, right, or resilience,
Yeah.
right. Those things have now assumed a lot of importance, right. And yes, they happened more and more because of the pandemic, but I don't see any organization pulling back its mental health related sort of learning. And maybe we should not use the word training. Let's talk about learning, right? Because it's not just always one person teaching you something. It's just the creating an ecosystem where you have access to different,
Correct.
sort of learning inputs. So this is a change that is fairly irreversible, because think of what all has happened outside of the L&D world. Also look at the business world. The pandemic has given many millions of people a different perspective on what their life is all about, right? Why are we doing what we're doing? There was a very famous, if I remember correctly, it was by Sahid Ludhianvi. It
Mhm.
was a song picturized on Dilip Kumar, where the line goes, किस लिए जीते हैं हम, किसके लिए जीते हैं, बारह ऐसे सवालात पे रोना आया.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
It was from a movie called Hum Dono.
Okay.
So that's the reality for many people today. That the people who were running around, trying to earn and do better and things, suddenly are seeing their near and dear ones die, or people around them, families getting demolished really because of the pandemic. I think that why the hell are we doing what we are doing? One of the repercussions of that is what we are calling the Great Resignation, isn't it? Right? People are just chucking their high stress jobs, and just want to do something else, or it's not always a positive thing, by the way. And if you look at India, uh, one of the worst statistics that I have seen over the last couple of weeks is the massive drop in women's employment, women in the workforce,
Yeah.
right? So, we have to think of addressing that. But coming back to what we were saying, so because people, there, many of us, our priorities are changing, right? Which means that for us to be able to engage in the workforce for my organization, I need to have motivation other than just earning my money. I need to feel comfortable. I need to feel wanted. I need to feel supported, right? And human resources and L&D working together are the face of the organization that can provide these things, to the employee, right? So L&D doesn't work in a vacuum. Even though we are talking about L&D can't work in a vacuum. That was again an old paradigm. I create training courses and I give it to you. Now, one of the positive things that has happened because of the pandemic is that because HR, L&D are the experts in terms of, or at least supposedly the experts in terms of how to engage the workforce, how to upskill them, engage them, help them. They are now part of business strategy, and I think that's a massive improvement
Hmm.
over what used to be. I don't think any business nowadays actually goes out and thinks of, getting into something new, recruiting a new cohort without having L&D and HR give their inputs about how are we going to support them, how are we going to do their onboarding instead of just an induction course. The whole onboarding situation. How are we going to provide them with the perks that they want? How can we support the fact that they might be working from a tier two town, right, and not force them to come to a main town where they can't afford the rent, etc. And then how do we train them in the skills that we want them beyond what we are, beyond what they know, and we have recruited them. We need to train them to. All these things are now working together,
Hmm.
and it's it's a great thing, I think. And it is, again, this is irreversible, because if one organization does this and is successful, the second one does it and is successful, then the fifth organization will have no choice but to do it if they want to compete in the marketplace for talent,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that is the major sort of thing that I have seen
Mm.
in every organization. And now when we sort of work in situations where we look at different different industries and all, this is fairly common. The one area where it still probably has to percolate down is the SME and the MSME sector, which kind of still works a bit ad hoc.
Mm.
But I have no doubt that they will also be competing for talent,
Yeah.
right? And that is, it has to, the employee support and employee learning, these two have to work together,
Yeah.
regardless of the organization.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think some very important points there, Shantanu. Of course, you talked of it is not just that we needed that those sort of health related trainings in the early days. It has become an irreversible trend, and also there is a link in kind of a rethink. So I love that reference to the song that you cited. More of a rethink about life, and where work fits in and how I want to really view it, or what sort of importance and what structure I want to have in it. So there's multiple forces at work, but at the same time the end result, what you are saying is L&D is becoming part of business strategy, and that is probably the biggest irreversible trend that we are seeing.
I hope it's irreversible. But yeah, I tend to think that it will never go back to L&D working in a silo. That's my hope.
Mm. So very recently, I was listening to a podcast by Brandon Carson, who's the CLO at Walmart, and he uh, put a phrase out which was "learning is the new strategy." So obviously it's aligning with what you are saying, and possibly giving it a even bolder outlook, if I can say. But looks like it's a common trend across the world, and yeah, like you, I also hope it is not a reversible one. It is irreversible.
Oh, I love it when people like Brandon, they make these bold statements, because what that actually means, that at least we are there somewhere. I mean, learning, obviously it's not the new strategy, but by that exaggeration, for somebody as important as him, the message he's sending out is, at the very least, learning is part of strategy
Correct.
now,
Absolutely.
right? So I think yeah, I mean, I kudos to him for articulating that, because
Fantastic.
he's an influencer.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's, if we can look at any specific things that you think are becoming key parts of the strategy now, of learning strategy in an organization, or workplace learning strategy in the post-pandemic world. What do you see are the major elements of that strategy, or how is it shaping up?
Um, I think two or three things are really important, and they kind of tend to follow the whole kind of HR process, and learning is part of everything. As I said, one of the things is that uh, because of the war for talent, as we have in learning, many organizations are actually going out and looking for people uh, whose main qualification, other than the basic qualification, whose main, uh, I wouldn't use the word qualification, whose main quality
Yeah.
is the ability to learn,
Mm.
right? And in fact, yesterday or day before, an interview uh, given by Julie Sweet, the CEO of Accenture, said exactly that. Somebody asked her the question that, what is the best quality in a employee that you look for while hiring? She said the desire and the ability to learn new things. So when you have a war for talent, you can't always afford to go out and get the people who already know everything about the subject, right? So what do? You get people who have the ability to know, who ability to learn new things and be able to do what the organization wants them to do. And the way to do it is to get, is to have a sort of way to get those people be able to gauge from your interactions, interviews, the people who have that yen, for learning new things, bring them in and make them learn those new things, right? So L&D, that's one area that L&D is going to play a major part in, especially at the fresher or 5 years experience, 10 years experience sort of level.
Yeah.
The second area is, as I mentioned earlier, because there's a vast swathe, I would say that entire band of employees who need to be reskilled, right? Or upskilled, depends on what you, or cross-skilled,
Yeah.
right? Because we are in an age where a person has got certain qualities, and the reason a person is not being 100% effective in his role is not because he has suddenly become a bad employee, but because the requirement of the job is changing.
Yeah.
You don't want to do, I mean, any organization worth its salt doesn't want to lose that person, right? Or they should not want to lose that
Yeah.
person and just get the new, next new thing, because we know good people are hard to get. You need to be able to upskill them, right? And of course, assuming that they want or they have the ability to learn new things. This is another area. Skilling is going to be really big
Hmm.
in L&D.
Hmm.
Okay, I think over the next few years, I see skilling becoming a major, sort of area. Things like uh, role mapping,
Hmm.
right? Getting the right person in the right role with the help of data, with the help of artificial intelligence, with the help of tools,
Hmm.
mapping that role right people, and then people based on the job requirement.
Hmm.
So that's one area I see happening, quite a bit, and I also see technology stepping up to the plate to help organizations do this thing,
Hmm.
right? And we can talk about technology a little later also. Then the third area is now you have the new people who are going to learn new skills. You have the upskilling, cross skilling, because of roles, etc. And then you have that entire creation of the learning ecosystem. Now,
Hmm.
whether you do it, obviously you do it first by creating a culture of learning. I mean, it's a term that we have used many times, and we have heard many times. But what does it mean? I think every organization needs to define it for itself. It's not just you tick box A, box B, box C, you create a culture. No, at best you create a culture for ticking boxes, right? The culture of learning where everybody understands that it is part of our job, right? So I do my work, I do my productivity, I do my deliverables, I learn,
Hmm.
right? It's part of my job, and everybody does that as a matter of course, without complaint, without thinking that, okay, why am I being forced to do all this? That's the culture of learning. And I think, after the pandemic, organizations have suddenly realized, because of the vacuum that I spoke about, they suddenly realized the importance of creating that culture.
Hmm.
I know that all pervasive sort of. And I think again, what helps really in doing this is support, not just from HR and L&D, that goes without saying, but technology, right? Do you have the right LMS? Do you have the right LXP? Do you have a document management system? Do you have a learning record store? Are you able to create individualized or at least job role based learning paths? And are those learning paths relevant rather than just random things that people do? Do they all lead to a certain skill? Are you able to measure that skill? Are you able to map that skill to your business strategy, sort of skill dashboard, etc.? Technology, at least for larger organizations, will play a big part in helping them create this whole ecosystem culture of learning, right? And also, if you go one level, further, what's going to happen is, uh, we were talking about the whole VILT, just classroom merging into VILT. It has to be There has to be a better ways to improve that experience, right?
Right.
So I'm hoping that new innovations like augmented reality, virtual reality, the metaverse.
Yeah.
We keep hearing about the metaverse. I'm hoping that these, fantastic sort of technological advancements are used in the right way to enhance this whole learning ecosystem, so that it goes at least it's some way in fulfilling at least 35 out of that 70%,
Mm.
where you can approach people just like you would approach an office, but it's in the metaverse, for
Mm.
example,
Mm.
right? Earlier, I used to be a little, frankly, till about 3 or 4 years back, I used to be a little skeptical of the AR, VR sort of things, um, because the experiences that I had when I did demos and stuff like that, they were underwhelming,
Yeah.
right? And they looked like a force fit, like a stunt, rather than anything which is really intrinsic. It's like using 3D in a movie.
Yeah.
90% of 3D movies are utter crap because the same story can be told equally effectively in 2D.
Correct.
All it does is darken the screen and throw some things at your face, right? It's
Yeah.
only when you see one or two movies like The Life of Pi or Avatar that you really understand the power of 3D. Avatar cannot be told without 3D.
Yeah.
That story,
Yeah.
right? Without 3D, that story would be really very very normal sort of thing. So that is the right harnessing of technology is important. I'm hoping now with lots of companies kind of getting onto the platforms and doing innovative research, and all this will work only if it's scalable, right? So if there is one corner of one world where people are doing fantastic VR training, wearing very advanced, sort of a contraptions over the year, eyes, that's no use because you can train 10 people, 20 people that way. Unless you are able to scale it, right? It won't work. And I think that is the next challenge which many organizations are trying. So these are the three areas where I feel, that's where we are going.
Fantastic. Hmm. So just to list out those three that you mentioned, of course, in terms of workplace learning strategy as it is evolving, the ability to learn becomes one of the key factors in hiring. In fact, I was reminded of when you talked of Julie Sweet's comment, I was reminded of Satya Nadella's comment in his book where he said, we probably don't need know-it-alls, we need learn-it-alls, people who can learn and continue to improve on a regular basis. But I think it is becoming more, you know, pervasive,
Yes.
not just in large organizations, but even in small ones.
It's even more important for the oldies like me, for example. I'm not including you
Or
in that.
me.
I was being polite, but okay, sure, if you want.
Yeah.
But it's even more important for us, right? Because for us, I'm one of the things I love about my job currently is that there is something new to learn every day, in technology wise, and I'm learning something literally, even the 10% and 20, I'm learning something new literally every day. It's like, I'm in a kid in a candy shop. There are so many opportunities right now to learn. And because I love it, I love learning new things. Sometimes it gets overwhelming, but I would rather be overwhelmed with new learning opportunities than not have them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, and learning keeps us young as well.
Yeah, one of my longest stints, in my career, I've worked with, so one of the companies that I worked with longest for more than 10 years, I did a lot of great stuff, but all the learning was kind of in that 70% in co-ed space.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't get many opportunities to do that. So I regret it now. I say I spent so many years in that organization. They should have had a better learning ecosystem for me, right?
Correct. Correct. And the second thing you were talking of is reskilling, upskilling, cross-skilling, etc., is going to become even more important, pretty much tied with the themes of great resignation and rethink and fight for talent, etc. It's pushing more towards that. That can be leveraged or done better with technology, of course, but learning ecosystems are the third big piece that most L&D strategy will include. So those three big pieces about ability to learn, reskilling, upskilling, and ecosystem.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So, you said you want to talk about technology separately as well. So did you cover that within the metaverse, or there's something else you want to talk about?
No, I think I think we need to understand for L&D, technology tends to end at Zoom, right? Unfortunately, but that's because that's only when you're looking at technology from a very, just the training bit perspective. So when when I talk about an ecosystem, there are opportunities to, there are need to the L&D folk, especially, people like you and me, we are part of this whole, L&D community. We need to go out and understand what is out there just beyond the LMS and the LXP, right? LMS, LXP, they are merging, they are kind of borrowing from each other's features now. So I don't know where that will end, or LMSs are buying LXPs and vice versa. All these things are happening now. But beyond that, what? I mean, there's still the interface really, where there are other things that are there. From an organizational perspective, if you want to create a skills ontology for your organization, either you can sit down with 10 HR people and ask them to list out all the skills and the sub skills and all that, or you can use a technology-based solution to be able to use AI and data really to scar the entire industry that you're in and give you a skills ontology, and then rate your organization based on where you stand there, and use that as a starting point, which is a much more scientific sort of way to do that. And then use that as the base. You have your skills ontology, you have where your organization stands, then you do a deep down and look at your employee skill levels in not only the current skills requirement but also future skills requirement.
Yeah.
Right, which you can also get through data collection and AI, and then use L&D and your structure, your LMS and LXP and all that kind of thing to fill that gap. Right.
Yeah.
Right now, a lot of it happens from the gut. Right, and I think we need to. Okay, the flip side, of course, people will say that technology is always expensive. Using these kind of things are always expensive. So it's probably not accessible to everybody yet, but it will become accessible. And more organizations, when they ask for it, there will be, right now there might be one or two main providers who are expensive, but others will come in the way, just like happened with HRMS systems. Right? They were expensive, and now there are a suite of small startups who are providing HRMS, doing a very good job. Some of them are unicorns in India.
Yes.
We know them. Right. So something similar will happen. Just like what Moodle did to LMSs, I'm sure this kind of thing will happen. But people need to ask for it in the market. People need to understand that this is every decision that we take, including L&D, needs to be data based, right? It needs to be based on metrics, right? And only then can you actually track it back and check efficiency, effectiveness, and ROI. Right?
Yeah.
So I think one of the interesting things that I'm trying to reach here is that L&D folk also need to upskill themselves to be more data driven and metrics driven. And it doesn't mean that you become you look at spreadsheets rather than think of. So I would say that everybody needs, when I talk about cross skilling, I'd say that everybody needs that cross skilling. Instructional designers also need to understand the data based on how their training program is being received and do something about it.
Correct.
When you get the data. Right now they have no access to data, most of them. Instructional designers write something and they are done. Yeah. Visual designers write draw something and they're done. How will they improve? How will they look at a larger holistic perspective if a business does not include them in the results of what they're creating, right? And that stands for all of it. It stands for also the kind of organization that you work for,
Yeah.
right? It's difficult to get all that, data from your clients, etc. I understand, but that's where influence comes in, and that's where at least the people who are working on a project should know what happened to that project after it's been.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. And yeah, sometimes data has been a challenge, but I think the a broader point that you are making, and please correct me if I did not understand it right, is that through data and AI, let's say, especially for creating a skills ontology that you want to create, you are getting at the purpose of whatever you want to do through the vehicles, which is an LMS or LXP. LMS LXP is just the how.
Hmm.
The data and AI is giving you the why and exactly what you want to do, right, through LMS LXPs, which are vehicles which you can use. But we should not just get stuck at LMS and LXP and start doing something there. You need to
Correct.
have that
So
back end.
there's a data set that goes before the LMS LXP stage,
Correct.
and there's a data set that is after the LMS LXP
It kind
stage.
of closes the
Right.
loop.
Correct. And both need to be available to them.
Correct.
Right now we have some mechanisms for collecting data post deployment,
Hmm.
right? At
Yeah,
least
yeah,
because
yeah.
the LMS will. But the pre-deployment things,
Yeah.
that the skills bit is something that is still largely ignored in, at least unless it's a big organization or
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. Are you seeing any, such skills ontologies like LinkedIn? Through its LinkedIn learning platform, it allows companies to map skills within its organizations. Is it a good starting point for especially MSMEs?
I think it is. I think it is. Rather than having zero data, what you get, from by the way, I'm not running down LinkedIn. I think they've done a good job,
Mhm.
and I think it really helps as an organization. Um, there are also research organizations that do that, but I don't see any reason why LinkedIn can't be a great starting point.
Yeah,
And I believe other LinkedIn is also a content provider organization. I believe other content providing organizations who compete with LinkedIn
yeah,
Learning,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I have also started providing this current skills, future skills, ontologies, or things like that. This is a subscription model on this. At least, it's something that I think definitely is a good starting point
Yeah.
for organizations. Yes.
Fantastic. And also, I think the point you made about, L&D teams themselves need to upskill themselves is a recurring theme that I am hearing from the guests who come on the podcast. So it's been something that needs to really go down to the L&D community equally strongly, that unless we keep upgrading ourselves and reskilling ourselves, neither are we creating a role model, nor are we in a great position to think about how learning really happens for our people, what are the challenges they may also be facing, etc.
And let's face it, uh, for organization L&D folk, there's one role in L&D folk which is underrepresented, and I think should be more, is that their ability to sell,
Mm,
right? All L&D people have to be salespeople.
mm,
Either they are selling to their internal customers,
mm,
or you know, like your organization, you're selling to external customers. But you're
mm.
also L&D folk. I'm also L&D folk. We have different customers maybe, but we are selling
Yeah, yeah,
content. Unless you know what you're talking about, you'll sell the same old thing,
correct.
right? And for some time it will pass
Mm,
because your
mm.
customers don't know better, till a better salesperson comes along and sells the new big thing which you haven't done it,
Yeah,
right? And in an internal scenario, what that means is that somebody else is coming and giving proper so ideas, and you are not. As an employee, you will be known as the person who hasn't evolved or upskilled, right? As a vendor, you will be known as the vendor who just does the basic requirement and not giving us any new ideas to do that. Because remember, every organization is looking to do what we were discussing over the last 30 minutes. They're looking to be a better place for learning. They're looking to give that experience to their employees, and they will be looking at their partners, their vendors, to be able to provide that
correct. Yeah,
experience. So
yeah,
anybody in your team or my team, internal, external, we will have to know what's going on out there, what's feasible, what's not, do our research, do our own learning. It's a survival tactic. It's not a nice to have.
Yeah, yeah. It's important that we, get on that train and really adopt that learning practice ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shantanu, I wanted to pick your brain on. There was a recent report by Fosway in the UK about, with all of the digitalization of learning that has happened over the last 2.5 years, and possibly a little bit of it haphazard, forced by the pandemic, very rushed. A lot of companies bought LMSs in the first 6 months because everything came to a halt. There is a sense of digital learning fatigue that is setting in. So their latest survey reported that a lot of people are reporting it, and they also identified learning experience as the thing that is becoming most critical focus area for learning leaders. So those two data points coming out from that research, digital learning fatigue is becoming an issue, and learning experience becoming a critical factor of focus for learning leaders. How do you see this?
I think, I mean, there's a point to it, right? Because when you move everything, digital, earlier the whole experience, there were different modes and you were experiencing everything a little bit. It's like having different items on the menu, right?
Mhm.
Now you are taking the most nutritious one, but if you only have that on the menu, then there tends to be a bit of sort of fatigue. I think I do think it's a self-correcting
Mhm.
mechanism because um, much of digital learning, there are some things that are going to be mandatory. There are some things that are going to be optional. You can't make everything mandatory.
Yeah.
And this data point obviously or probably would have come from checking the mandatory versus optional adoption in a sort of rates. So if the optional thing kind of goes down, then you know that there's a bit of digital fatigue because everything moves on. I think what happened, we are not even out of the pandemic. It's been like little more than 2 years,
Yeah.
right? So obviously there was a rush to move everything to digital, right? And the pendulum hasn't yet moved the other way, right? It's moved one way, it's not yet moved back.
Yeah.
So it will find its, it's like water, it'll find its level
Mm.
at some point. So yes, I can understand the fatigue. I don't think the level or the sheer volume of digital learning will remain at this. It will remain high, much higher than pre-pandemic levels, but people will start to be, when I say people, I mean L&D folk and businesses will start to be a little more discerning about 100% digital versus 80% digital sort of thing. So not everything will be moved digital. People will start to, instructional designers included, will start to make hard choices by saying that, okay, learning type A has to be done digitally, learning type B has to be done, but C can probably be a PDF that people can read at their own time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And D can probably be a conversation or an email, right? So those hard choices will happen. Um, so I'm not really worried about the digital fatigue. It's bound to happen, but I think it will take care of itself. The second question you had was about the
Uh, that learning experience is becoming the go-to thing for learning leaders.
correct, and that is probably one of the answers to the first question itself. Um Fatigue happens when you do the same thing again and again, right? So when you create a learning experience that is unique, innovative, it's great for the first couple of times, but if every learning is like, then no matter, as I said, no matter how good it is, there'll be fatigue. So I think from an L&D perspective, the objective will be to keep innovating in terms of learning, and not just design. As I said, the mode of deploying learning, the use of the use of technology, the use of LMS, blended learning, hybrid learning is going to be there, more and more. Um, as it is, I don't know if you probably have noticed that even the whole VILT that we used to conduct, that has changed a lot over the last couple of years. VILTs are becoming more innovative. Technology is supporting them. Now you can do breakout rooms. You can add Mentimeter to
Yeah,
it. You
yeah.
can do all these kind of things. Earlier, it was just one guy talking,
Right.
right? So that learning experience, if something has to be done, let's make it palatable. Let's make it better. If something needs to be done to, let's think of innovative ways of doing that. And that is the learning experience we're talking about. And all these things become mitigated if you have that culture of learning that I'm talking about, because
Mm,
then you are not constantly thinking of the mode.
mm,
If it's part of the culture, then people will learn uh, on their own.
mm,
In organizations where there's a culture of learning, people will seek out learning. So you don't have to mandate everything. When you mandate everything, it becomes also, fatiguing in
yeah.
a way, right?
Definitely.
So so yes, learning experience is of course paramount. It's, as I said, it's like employee experience, right? From hiring to your, to support for mental health. As I say, everything is about your target audience, experience. If you're an L&D person in an organization, everything is about the experience that people are getting when they interact with you or when they see your products. As a vendor organization, everything is about how you enable the client to help their employees. So yes, I mean, learning experience is paramount. There's no doubt about it. It's how what are the tools that you use, what are the methodologies that you use to enhance it, that really matters. If you keep using the same tool, there'll be fatigue,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I think that's a great connection that you also draw, which is if you have a good learning experience, the chances of fatigue are lesser because people are themselves seeking out learning. Learning experience itself could be a little better. Of course, you can't, relax and say anything will work, but at the same time, yes, you may have a different situation there. Excellent, excellent.
Yeah. So for example, and there's a trade-off always,
Mm, mm,
remember. So for example, some of the best learning that I've uh, seen recently has been on information security, and it's a video-based
mm,
learning,
mm,
and such a lot of thought and effort, and it's beautiful learning. It's like watching a movie,
mm,
right,
mm,
with plot lines and things like that. But there's a trade-off. It's probably it's definitely expensive to create, but the subject itself is something that you can mandate people to know about infosec rules in your organization. You can't keep forcing training down people's throat, because training is ultimately on how to discover phishing and how to discover things like that. So you can't keep forcing, and this is something that people have to refresh learning all the time, because there are new methods coming in all the time. So, but you want every employee to know that, what are the different aspects of information security. Therefore, you decide that the trade-off is that I'm going to spend more on it, but I make something so interesting
mm.
that people will wait for the next episode,
Yeah.
right? Even if I have to pay more for it, because ultimately, what is the business impact of this? The business impact could be millions of dollars in saved,
Absolutely.
in savings.
Yes.
Otherwise, people, what we lose if we lose information security protocols, or if we break protocols,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So that's the ability to weigh. It's two or three things are happening here. One is ability to weigh cost and benefit,
Mm,
right? B, ability to see the big picture, right? And C, a thorough knowledge of where the business priorities lie,
mm.
and to be able to draw the link between learning to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think in any conversation, if all these three come into play, I think that's probably a very rewarding conversation. I think if we can start with the business impact or a potential business impact, it can put a lot of things in perspective, and more appropriate solutions can always be designed. Excellent. Fantastic. Shantanu, thank you so much. Thank you. It was a wonderful conversation. I have learned so much from your experiences and your knowledge. Thank you for sharing all of that.
So welcome, and it was very pleasurable for me to. Very excellent conversation. Thank you, Amit.
Thank you.